amazing guest for you today. We have with us Ryan Christensen. Ryan is a professional hypnotist, entrepreneur, and Marine Corps Air National Guard veteran with 20 years in the intelligence community, who transforms high achievers and neurodivergent professionals by reshaping subconscious beliefs for peak mental focus. Drawing on his personal struggles with depression, autism, Asperger's, and bipolar disorder, he developed a new model of belief construction, which has been detailed in Winner Peace: How to End Inner Conflict and Make Success Inevitable, to guide others toward inevitable success. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, and we have a lot of interesting questions for you today. But before we dive into it, we do
Mhm.
like to have an icebreaker on the show. And the question for you today is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
Man, my favorite was always Wolverine. Not just because he's like a badass. That's always fun, but just the curmudgeonly, like, why don't you leave me alone? Like, why is everybody always bringing me their problems? Like, why does nothing ever work the way it's supposed to be? Because that's kind of like the story of my life. Nothing ever really worked for me the way it's supposed to. And everybody just seemed to get along so much easier than me. So having that person where just like it just doesn't work for him was something I could really relate to.
Yeah, I see. I definitely I like that one. So I was more of a Deadpool guy myself, but
Yep. Never had the sense of humor for that.
yeah, well, yeah, but no, I like Wolverine. I like Wolverine too. It's
Mhm.
it's a good one. So Ryan, yeah, the first question we have to sort of kick off the podcast is, what is procrastination to you? How do you define it, and what does it mean to you personally?
I actually really like procrastination, which is an odd way to say it. I always fought against it forever. The ADHD and the being fairly intelligent meant that everything was like way too easy. So I was always wait for the last minute to do stuff, and always beat myself up of like, oh, I should have, like, I've had 3 weeks to do this assignment. Why did I wait till the night before? And over time, I realized it's like, okay, wait a second. I can always get it done at the last minute, right? I never miss it. It's always done on time, and I always kill it. So why am I freaking out about doing it earlier when it doesn't actually have to be done earlier? Right. And so since that time, I've sort of learned about two different principles um, that really kind of reframe things. The first is this idea of Scott Adams' law of slow moving disasters. Okay. Scott Adams, cartoonist, hypnotist, podcaster, brilliant guy, author, phenomenal guy. Basically, he said, okay, if we see a problem coming far enough in advance, we're going to get it solved by the time it gets there. Right. Has to be solved at some point between now and then. It's going to get solved because we know it's a problem. So if taxes are due on April 15th, I have to do them somewhere between January 1st and April 15th. There's no reason to put an arbitrary deadline of February 3rd. There's not. It has to be done by April 15th. And since we know it's a problem, our mind is already working on it. It already knows there's something to do, already knows we need to solve it. So it's already figuring out when the best time to do so is. So instead of putting that arbitrary pressure on myself of putting an earlier deadline, no, when I feel the time is right, I'm going to get it done. And it gets done. Since then, I've also looked at procrastination as a very, very useful signal. Okay. I look at emotions and all these instincts and stuff in a very different way that a lot of people do. I don't beat myself up for them. I look at them as questions and signals in our mind telling us like what's going on, right? Because that's the job of the unconscious mind is to interpret the world around us. It's also the part of us that does all the work. So we kind of get to give it this due. So for me, procrastination means one of three things: either I'm doing the wrong thing, I'm doing it at the wrong time, or I'm doing it the wrong way, right?
Hmm.
If I want to do this thing now, and my mind's like no, then there's probably something else I should be doing. What that is, I don't know. It could be sitting down and playing video games and taking a freaking break because been running my butt off too hard. That's entirely viable. Or I'm doing it at the wrong time, right? Taxes due April 15th. Trying to sit down on February 3rd to do it. My mind's like, no, you should be doing other stuff. You should do it another time. And last but not least, doing it the wrong way. When I was sitting there trying to write my book, I banged my head against the wall for like 6 or 7 months trying to put this thing together. Trying to map stuff and trying to figure out how I was supposed to structure it and just getting absolutely nowhere. Frustrating as hell. Then my friend talked to me about this ghostwriter, Joshua Lysick. Had a book called So Good They Call You Fake, talking about how to write a really good book. And I'm like, oh man, this guy gets it. He nails it. And he's a hypnotist on top of it. So he like gets where I'm coming from and gets what I'm doing. So hired him and dumped like 10, 12 audio hours with audio. I'm just word vomited as much as I could. And the next week had a first draft that was 80% right. I was doing it the wrong way. I wasn't supposed to try and figure this thing out myself. I was supposed to hire the guy that could do it for me. I need a translator. So of course my mind was trying to find another way to do it. Of course it was fighting me along the way because I was doing it the wrong way. It's making it too dang hard. So to me, procrastination is signals like, okay, you should be doing something else in a different way. Your mind is telling you this is not the right way to go. Listen to it. Stop fighting it. Listen to it. Use it as a tool. Use it as a way to actually live your life better.
That's that's interesting. I kind of like that reframing of it though. You're either
Hmm.
not doing the right thing, you're not doing it at the right time, or you're just doing it in the wrong way. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, your unconscious mind, its job is to interpret reality and to handle all the actual working for you, right? If you think about your mind as business, I kind of go over this in my book. You got your instinctive mind, your emotional mind, your rational mind, and your conscious mind, right? Your instinctive mind is kind of like your worker bees, your line guys, your accountants, and so forth and so on. It's there to deal with like your physical survival. Your emotional mind is like your middle management types, but think about meaning and relationships. Your rational mind, like senior management, worried about how things work. Consciousness is supposed to be the CEO of the company, right? It's supposed to point the direction and kind of like watch the movie your life play out in time to be the witness of your experience, right? The CEO should not be micromanaging the accounting department. He should not be caring about how the TPS reports work. That's not his job. He's got people for that, right? So if you're trying to micromanage and force your brain to do things, you're getting involved in micromanaging the crap out of your company. And all of us have worked for that boss who just won't get the heck out of the way, right? And who just makes everything 10 times harder, right? So, number one, don't be that boss to yourself. The other thing is, those parts of your mind have a job and they're trying to tell you what's going on. So perhaps we should listen because we've got people to handle that stuff saying, hey, boss, here's a problem. And we've also all worked for that boss who wouldn't freaking listen. Say, hey, boss, problem. It's like, no, 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 problem. No, 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 problem. And it blows up in their face. And what happens when we ignore those feelings and gut instincts? It blows up in our face pretty much every time. So perhaps we should start listening.
No, that's those are some very valid points right there. Should listen to our feelings and not feeling in alignment and things like that.
Hmm.
Really like that. Why don't we just dive into a little bit about the book
Sure.
there? You mentioned that,
Hmm.
you found you weren't doing it the right way, but
Hmm.
so they the saying, right? There's 98% of writing is procrastination, the other 2% is actually doing it. I guess in your
Hmm.
case, it wasn't really true then. It was more just not doing it in the right way.
Yeah, yeah. Fundamentally, because the autism, it's very hard for me to speak from somebody else's perspective. Like this idea of like theory of mind is really hard. So for me, all the stuff that I've learned and all this system I created is like just one big honking ball of stuff in my head. There's no beginning, end, whatever. It's just like one big thing. Because I think in like systems, I look at the system as a whole as a single thing. So once I've created this understanding of the mind and how all that stuff works, that's just one big system. So trying to figure out where to start to like explain how that thing works is like, I don't know. Now, when I'm having a conversation with somebody, the questions they ask, the way they respond, that tells me where they're at. Like, okay, I know you're here. Now I can lead you here. But if I'm starting with a blank page, I'm like, what the heck am I supposed to do? Right. So rather than try and do that, which is what I've been banging my head against the wall for like 7 months, like, okay, I've got a guy who specializes in telling the right story and organizing information and building the books and building the narratives. Great. I'm just going to word vomit everything that I can think of. Like, sat there and just talked for like 10 or 12 hours about all the different aspects and all these different ways of doing things and all these different theories I have to say, here, make it make sense. And he did. Right. So for me, it was the 98% procrastination was 98% trying to figure out who the hell I should hire to translate this crazy ass thing into something that people could understand. And the 2% writing was, here you go, you do it. you know, and then we spent like, about an hour a week over the next, 2 or 3 months to sort of massage the transcript and the book and get it all looking right and everything else. And then he took care of all the typesetting and so forth and so on. I recorded the audiobook and bada boom, bada bing, here we are.
That's really interesting. And like to probably learn a little bit more about that.
Mhm.
But before we do that, like to get a little bit about your background. Sort of
Sure.
where you came from, how you got to be where you are today.
Well, it's very different journey for sure. Like my story is not typical. I grew up in Kansas, of all places, in the 70s and 80s. The world just did not work for me. Like works just fine for everybody else. I cannot figure out how to navigate this thing. Nobody has any idea what the heck is wrong with me. Nobody can help me, right? So gave up on life pretty young. The first time I wanted it in my life was probably about 9. And so I had to create this way of, well, I just knew I was never going to get what I want in life. Going to do nothing but suffer. So if I'm going to suffer forever, I get to decide how long that is. At least that's a choice I get to make, right? There's some power and some agency in that. But of course, that's not the answer your mind wants, especially at 9 years old. So it's got to give you a reason to keep on coming, sticking around, right? So it's like, okay, I'm gonna suffer forever. Know that for sure. Got to give myself a reason to be around. I was reading a lot of like sci-fi, military fiction, fantasy stuff like that. So this idea of like heroic sacrifice was a big part of my background, in my life, and that. Like, okay, well, I could become Batman. Batman's life sucks, right? Sucks, but it's a really good thing he's around. It's a really good thing for Gotham City that Batman is around, is willing to put himself in that kind of situation to help them out. Fair enough. So that's what led me down this road of the military and intelligence work. Joined the Marine Corps at 21. Spent 5 years there as a Russian linguist. Went another 6 years with the Air National Guard, working intelligence for like Predators, U-2s, fighter jets. Spent 16 years in DC, working counterterrorism, counterproliferation, all that kind of stuff. And pretty good at what I did. Really pretty good at what I did. Was able to do some really cool stuff. Make sure some bad stuff didn't happen. But 2019, 2020 rolls around and they're not letting me do the cool stuff anymore. So I'm doing more like project management stuff, which is utterly unfulfilling. And I'm realizing it's like, wait a second, I'm throwing myself under the bus, not living a great life, not really getting what I needed. And the world rather stubbornly does not want to be saved. In fact, things are getting worse. Clearly, I'm in the wrong line of work. But the problem is now I need a different reason to live, right? Because that old one doesn't work. So I started working with people one on one. That gave me that kind of satisfaction of helping people. But I needed to find a way to get what I needed in life. Otherwise, like I was done. Like I was done suffering. This was not working for me. And that's what really started me on this real self improvement healing journey between 2019 and 2023, where I just tried every freaking thing. Like I went to war, especially in 2020. I'm like, I don't care what the hell it takes. I will do whatever I need to fix my head so I can actually live my life the way I want to. And that's really what got me into some of the deeper stuff, right? Like psychedelics and spiritual stuff and hypnosis and doing some really, really deep, powerful work. And everything really helped. Everything moved the ball forward. Everything opened some space. But because of the autism, I couldn't pretend that better equals fixed. Right? Nothing really fixed the problem. Right? This idea of like healing is a lifelong journey means that you're always broken and you're never healed. And that's a problem. So that's where I started like reverse engineering all these different modalities to figure out how they worked, what the limits were. 90% of the problems are in your unconscious mind. Psychedelics, hypnosis, only way to get down there, period. Psychedelics take you on their own ride, no control. You don't get to work on what you want to do. They take you on whatever they want to go. And there's limits to what kind of change you can do while you're down there because you're only bringing in your own tools, your own frameworks. After that ride is over, you're doing a lot of conscious integration to understand like how to navigate with all this new insight. But you can't change it because that door's shut again. So hypnosis it is. The normal persuasion and suggestion stuff has limited applicability because basically you're dumping a lot of new stuff in there, a lot of good stuff in there, trying to outweigh the bad. But you had old belief set and a new belief set fighting, and this sucker's got a lifetime of evidence. So the sucker usually wins. A lot of good stuff in terms of like habits, in terms of motivation, in terms of adding new possibilities. Fixing old stuff, limited. So I started reverse engineering beliefs. The idea of limiting beliefs makes perfect total sense. There's a construct in your head. You understand things a certain way, so you have to act a certain way in response. Makes sense. Great. With hypnosis, I get down to your unconscious mind. That's where all the information is. Your mind knows exactly what it's doing, knows exactly why it's doing it, knows exactly what it's trying to accomplish. And I have 23 years of intelligence experience. 23 years of trying to figure out stuff that people don't want me to know. And all the information is right there, and you want to give it to me. This is cheating, right? So started making some really powerful progress because we can understand where that old belief is. We can actually dismantle and disprove that old belief and then create a new chain of logic that creates a new conclusion. And the last thing I realized, and this was really kind of the major breakthrough for me, is difference of scale. Because we have this idea that there's one right answer. What we think is right and what we feel is wrong. And that's not actually true. Our mind is actually looking at the world through two different lenses simultaneously at all times. It's looking at the trees and the forest. Two different lenses, two different perspectives, two different sets of tools. Your emotional mind is looking at patterns over time, narratives over time. It's looking at the forest, not the trees. So it's drawing a different set of conclusions from a different perspective using different tools. Okay. Which means what you feel is 100% correct at all times, even if it's different, and especially if it's different what you think, because it's telling a different story from a different perspective. Right? Okay, great. This is a problem because I know I'm good enough. I don't feel that. Shoot. I'm not good enough. It's still playing out at this higher level. Fair enough. That has a structure. That came to be for a reason. There's a pattern that it saw. There's a chain of logic it used to draw this conclusion. Great. So instead of doing this stuff, let's take a look at that one. So you start deconstructing these emotional beliefs, these core emotional beliefs, and something really interesting happens. Number one, you got a big box in your head, label on the side says, I'm not good enough. A million things in that box. Typical approach, take stuff out, put in a different box. Fair enough, it works. But there's a million things in there. More stuff gets added all the time. That never ends. Which is why healing is a lifelong journey, right? Because you're taking stuff out, putting it into that box, right? But there's a label on the box. It says, I'm not good enough. Why not just take I'm not good enough off, put I am good enough on? Everything in the box now means I'm good enough, and you're just done. Right? And by getting that high level emotional construct correct, an interesting thing happens because your emotional mind is faster than your rational mind. So it comes to its conclusion first, which means everything you're analyzing on an individual level, the rational level, is set in this frame that your emotional mind has created. So a lot of the little stuff we see is like, I'm not good enough, popping up in a million different ways. Or there's something wrong with me, popping up in a million different ways. But if this becomes I'm good enough, you don't have to fight it down here anymore. So a lot of this little stuff goes away. So you can, in fact, get to a point where I'm fixed, I'm done, I'm healed, that's over. I'm good enough, I don't have to prove it, I'm done. It doesn't actually take long because those are very specific high level emotional constructs. And once you're playing at that level, correcting the macro level, the micro level becomes so much easier to manage.
No, it's definitely interesting, and I guess I'd never really considered hypnotism from that viewpoint before either. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like I was, and again, this is why
Yeah,
part of the reason we're talking today. There's a lot of misconceptions, right? Like all hypnotism is, making people talk like
yeah,
click like chickens, or going back into
sure.
past lives, or things like
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, what do you think was the biggest misconception about hypnotism that you found when you were, looking into it?
I think the biggest misconception around hypnosis is the idea of control. That I'm taking control of you, or I have control over you, or you're not in control anymore. Hypnosis is a voluntary process, right? I am leading you through a process. I'm leading you through an experience. You have to follow along. I'm giving instructions of do this, do this, do this. You got to do the thing, right? If you choose not to do the thing, doesn't work. If you don't want me to lead you, doesn't work. You don't want to go there, doesn't work. If you're down there, you don't like what's happening, you can bring yourself out, right? But because it's all what stage hypnosis, where people are doing stupid stuff, and I don't want to do that, clearly. And otherwise, it's like in horror movies, where it's all about mind control, right? Where you hear about these sleazy guys doing crazy stuff with it, and it's like, yeah, all that manipulative stuff happens, just like it does in every other industry, right? You hear about therapists doing that stuff all the time. Don't get me started on the whole Catholic priest thing, right? Like bad people doing bad stuff all the time whenever they have that power and influence. But hypnosis itself is we're leading you down into an altered state of mind, kind of like meditation, but getting you another level deeper in your mind. If you look at brain waves, like beta is your normal waking state, alpha is that meditative state, theta is where hypnosis happens, and delta is sleep. Theta is that interface between the waking and the dreaming mind, between your conscious and your unconscious mind, right? And a lot of the reason why the unconscious mind has such a hard time changing is because of how it's built to operate. Okay, there was a great series of experiments in 1970s back in Germany that basically proved that our conscious minds become aware of something about a half a second after it happens. Right, something happens to become aware about a half a second after. Brain's got to process all this stuff, correlate it, filter it, and give it to you as a picture, which means some part of you has to be able to act within that half a second window on its own. Driving down the road and you're a half a second behind, that's a bad idea. Welcome to drunk driving, basically, right? So there's got to be a part of your mind that's able to operate that. So that's your part of your unconscious mind. Got about 1 or 2 second period of time that's working in, just kind of managing that initial filtering, processing, and reaction space. Okay. If it's always right now, does it ever have any time to take a step back and reevaluate things? No, can't, right? And all the solutions that they're creating are for the instantaneous now. Solve this problem now, which means it can't take into effect second, third order effects. Can't take into long term impacts. Does drinking make stuff suck less? Yeah, right now, yes. Does it ruin you long term? Yes. This part of your mind can't understand that, not built to, right? The only time it has to step back and sort of reevaluate things is when you are asleep. Welcome to dreams. A lot of that is just mind kind of like making sense of the day and trying to figure out where you're at, trying to figure out what you do next. But it's doing it within the context of the frameworks and beliefs it already has. Because the rest of your mind's offline. Can't play with that down there, which is what makes hypnosis such a powerful tool. It allows us to bridge across those, lets us push pause on time for a moment. So it's got time to step back. We can communicate across that, negotiate new solutions, negotiate new ways of being, right? But because we're looking at hypnosis mostly as suggestion and persuasion, let me throw a bunch of stuff down there. Nobody's looking at that in terms of an exploration, negotiation sort of thing, right? It's a different approach, very much is.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for
Mm-hmm.
explaining that. And the processes that you're talking about, just changing these entire systems, the entire
Mm-hmm.
you know archetypes, or entire way of filing things.
Yep.
It sounds like, I mean, it's as simple as taking a box out, but I mean, you would have therapists talking about trauma and
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is that something a hypnosis can take care of relatively quickly, or is this or is it like a similar process?
Oh, 100%. Think about therapy as a conscious exploration of known narratives. Okay. You remember something. Great. That is the piece of your memory that your mind has given you to play with. Memory and recall different things. Memory, the entire record of what's going on. Recall what your unconscious mind has decided to give you because it gets a choice you don't. It gets to decide what shit. Great. So you have these different events that you remember, and you're trying to make sense of why you are based on these data points you have. Great. Cool. Number one, that's not in the entire data set, right? Number two, you're guessing at what's going on down there or why you reacted the way you are. So you create this beautiful narrative that makes total sense from these data points you have that kind of gives you an explanation why you are the way you are. Great. Is it true? You don't know. How many psychological theories out there? Dozens. All of them explain the same stuff in dozens of ways, right? We're guessing, right? Think about trauma. You're in a situation, something goes horribly wrong, massive negative emotional context to it, and it just freaks you the hell out and breaks you, right? Okay. A couple things are going on with that that I think are problematic. Okay. The whole trauma narrative, again, I looked at everything and says, okay, what are the limits? Okay. The trauma narrative is beautiful because it allows you to connect very easily with your experience. This thing happened, it sucks, it hurt like hell, traumatic, wounded, yada yada. Makes sense. Okay. Gives you a beautiful way to start interacting with stuff, start reframing it, start getting yourself to a better place. Love that. The problem with trauma narrative is if emotions are pain, you're always triggering that emotional part of your strival part of your mind, right? Your mind has to treat your emotional state, your mood, as a threat to your physical survival because it is, right? 300,000 people died last year from deaths of despair, right? Alcohol, drug overdose, suicide, 300,000 people. That's not counting everybody else whose lives were ruined in all different ways, right? So it has to act that way. The other thing is every traumatic event in your life is a different wound to heal. Every negative emotion experience is coming from another wound you got to heal. Remember that box with a million things in it? You're never done. You're always broken, always wounded. And because these things are things that happen to you, you're not even sovereign over the things you feel. Other people make you feel stuff. Okay. Now, that again, you can do a lot of work. You can get that 20-yard line and then you hit the wall, kind of spinning your wheels. I look at things differently. One of the core things that I look at is this idea that emotions don't have to be pain. If emotions are not pain, things change bigly, right? The way I look at it is emotions are not pain, they are questions. They are a mind asking you for help to solve a problem. If I'm angry, that's because something out there is pissing me off, it's threatening me in some way. I need to make it go away. If I'm afraid, something out there's a threat I need to go away from. Right now, we think about things in terms of physical threat, but if your emotions are pain and your mind has to treat them as a threat to your survival, your emotional reactions are equally a threat to your survival, right? So sometimes one of the biggest things we're trying to avoid is that emotional pain. I'm not going to go take that shot. I'm not going to go for the thing I want because if I fail, it makes me feel like crap. It makes me feel like a failure, which I don't want to be. That's too threatening, right? So when we transform emotions from pain into questions, now they're not threats to our existence anymore. We don't have to avoid them, right? We can engage with them. And because they're our mind helping us solve problems, it's actually helping us get to the places we want to be faster. You're confronting your problem. Great. I solved the problem. I get where I want to be faster. Right. And because getting anything you want in life is just solving a series of problems, the faster you can figure out the problem is, the better. Because the hardest part is figuring out what the heck is the real problem. Right. Okay, cool. So we do this transformation, emotions are now questions. Now what happens? Well, if emotions are no longer pain, they don't come from emotional wounds. Right. Congratulations, you're done healing. Not only are you done healing, you never really had to because you never actually wounded because there was never pain in the first place. We just understood it wrong. Right. We misunderstood what emotions were. We reacted to them differently. We're acting as if we were wounded because that's how we understood things. But if they're not pain, if they never were, then we're not wounded and we never were. That's very important. The other thing, it means trauma is a very different thing. Trauma is not something that happened, trauma is something that occurred. We were in a situation where we could not find a way to win. We were confronted with a challenge. Our mind was screaming at us for help. We didn't have an answer. That's it. But the interesting thing is this, we're still breathing. We survived. So we did, in fact, find a way to navigate that situation. We did, in fact, find a way to win because survival is a win. Not saying it didn't hurt, not saying it didn't suck, not saying we didn't take our hits, by all means. But survival is a win. And part of the problem with this idea of survival is this idea of fight and flight. We never talk about the other three: freeze and fawn and flop. Fight something off, you don't get hurt. Run away, you don't get hurt. So the idea is, I get hurt, threat to my survival. No. Freeze, you hid. Fawn, you surrendered, you rolled over, showed your belly, said whatever you need to. But the biggest one is flop. Flop is one we never talked about. Two guys fighting in a schoolyard, a bunch of people gather around them. One of the guys starts losing. What does he do? Try to run away, can't, hits the ground, curses the ball, covers himself up, takes it. Just endure what you have to. That is an effective survival response. Sometimes all you can do is take the beating because you got no option. Sometimes all you can do is sit there and let them yell at you because you don't have any option. But if that's what you need to do to navigate that situation, that is the proper way to do so. That's a win. Right? And when you start looking at traumas that way, it's like, okay, did it suck? Yes. Did I take my hits? Yes. Did I manage to find a way through? Yes. Okay, I found a way to win. What does this mean about how I need to navigate things in the future? Because that's it. The emotions, the questions we're asking are not how should I have done things different. It's about who I am and what I need to do next. How do I need to navigate the world next? So I'm never going to be in that situation again. Never going to be faced with that situation again. So I don't need to figure out how to navigate that. I need to figure out what it is about me and what is about the world that I need to understand so that in the future I can overcome similar kinds of challenges. It's all about what do I do next? Where do I go next? Past doesn't matter. Anything we can do about it. The only thing we can do about it is learn so that our future is better.
It's funny, and when you put it all together like that, it sounds really really simple, and yet we can't seem to. Majority of us can't seem to do that. Huh?
Well, again, think about it this way. Like, number one, have you ever heard anybody laid out like that? Because I haven't. I
No.
think I figured out a number of things just because I had to in order to like figure out a way to save my ass. I didn't really have a choice. Just figure this out or like I'm done. So I kept on going. But the other thing is, when you figure stuff out, it really is pretty simple, right? If things are complicated, you don't really understand it. When you really understand, oh, this is simple, right? It's this idea of like Bruce Lee. When you start out, a punch is just a punch. While you're learning, a punch is like 10,000 things, and once you master it, a punch is just a punch, right? Once you really thoroughly understand something, it's so freaking simple on a principle level. Application is really complicated, but the principles, yeah, very simple. And one of the simplest things to understand is that our mind decides how to interpret everything in the world. The meaning that we assign to things determines how we react. And we get to decide what meaning we assign to it. One of the reasons why I was able to get that idea of emotional pain, not having to be emotional pain, is that hypnosis is really good for pain control. Been used for controlling pain for centuries, right? Um, what's her name? Kate Middleton, wife of Prince William of England, actually used something called hypnobirthing, which is hypnosis for pain control during childbirth for all three of her kids. Access to most advanced medical care in the world, used hypnosis instead. Really effective. I had a mentor of mine. One of his clients was a trucker, really bad back problems, right? So over the course of a day, back would just hurt like hell. He couldn't work. So he changed the sensation of pain in his back from pain to heat. So as the day went on, his back would get more and more warm, and he knew it was time to take a break. But because it wasn't painful, it wasn't distressing, right? It's, oh, I'm getting warm and warm. Okay, time to take a break, right? Lady who taught me hypnosis gets migraines. If you know anything about migraines, anything you can do about it. But she's a hypnotist. So when she get a migraine, she just drop herself in a trance, go to the back of her head. The dial that says pain. She just turned it down from 8 to 3 and to go to back to her day. So if I can manipulate the sensation and the experience of physical pain using hypnosis to that degree, why can't I do the same with emotional pain? Nobody says I can't. And changing emotional pain from pain to questions is a really useful tool because it opens up so much stuff, right? Doesn't kick off the survival circuits. You can engage with it as much as you want. You can beat it as long as you need to figure things out, and it helps you navigate the world. And by the way, no wounds, not traumatized, get to move on with your life. That's incredibly useful. So I'm gonna do that. Does it make sense why we get there in the first place? Yeah. Growing up, only thing you can do is cry. All distress seems the same. Every talk about broken hearts, you hurt my feelings, so forth and so on. Every narrative out there tells you the pain. And for those of us who have gone through a lot, we've been bombarded with negative emotion that we can't escape for most of our childhood. That we're being told is pain. No wonder our minds go crazy trying to protect it from us. Protect us from it. Makes total sense. But that's okay because it doesn't matter how you understood things as a kid. If you've got the right tools and go down there and correct those misunderstandings, you can live a different life. And the trick is to use hypnosis in this particular way, which a lot of people aren't doing. We all try to figure it out on a conscious level, and we can understand things on a conscious level all we want, and it doesn't translate down there. Why? Because that party is not listening. Why? Because it doesn't have time. Once you realize, oh, this is what the problem is, it's not translating. Why? Doesn't have time. Great. Oh, we're looking from different perspectives. Have to take a different approach. Great. Once you understand those principles, the solution becomes pretty easy. Figuring out what that complication is the hard part. Again, hardest problem, part of solving any problem is figuring out what the problem is. The problem is we're interpreting emotions wrong. The problem is we're not correcting these old conclusions we made about ourselves. And we're not doing it because these things sit in the unconscious mind. We're not exploring it the right way, and we're not having a negotiation. We're not having a conversation with it because we don't have the tools, or we haven't really had the tools. Once you understand this is the problem set, this is where it is. Okay, great. The solution is pretty obvious.
I mean, that's kind of where it comes into, have a hypnotist, or I guess a guide, for lack of better words, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to go in and really navigate that, because I mean, you're right. The majority of us don't even know. Well, majority of us don't even really know there's a problem in the subconscious, right?
In a
um,
lot of ways, yeah.
I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just at going to something, consciously.
Sure.
So I had a traumatic event when I was younger, almost drowned, and I
Mm-hmm.
understand how this, affected me going forward in terms of
Mm-hmm.
water sports, all that other fun stuff. But I didn't really get until actually quite a bit ago that that also related to a little bit of my inability to ask for help, because it's like, well, you almost let me drown. Why should I trust you to help me? And also a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of my rescuer syndrome. Like, I know what it's like to drown, so therefore I want to,
Yep.
help other people not feel like they're drowning.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, well, from what I'm hearing, hypnosis would have been I'm able to uncover that in what, like 1, 2, 3 sessions, something like that, or how does it work?
Depending upon how you're going about things, yeah, yeah, fundamentally, yes. And again, like you see some like beautiful little cascade effects from that, right? Of like, oh, okay, like I can't ask for help because nobody's helping me, but it's probably not from that event. There's probably another bunch of other things as well, other situations where I couldn't get help when they were young, right? So that's just in a lot of ways these very traumatic events like PTSD and so forth and so on is just kind of like the straw that breaks the camel's back. There's an existing narrative that gets confirmed by that heavy event, right? There's a beautiful study by the Department of Defense that looked at PTSD. Like they're trying to figure out, like, okay, platoon of guys gets hit, ambush, a couple of people die. Like 40 guys had that same experience. Why does this one guy get PTSD and these other guys don't? That'd be really important to know, right? What they found was heavily correlated with trait neuroticism. Right, you got to have big five personality traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. Neuroticism is your tendency towards like negative thinking about yourself and the world. Okay, so what's happening is they've got this pre-existing negative opinion of themselves, like I suck, there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough, what I don't measure up with whatever the heck it is. They go in this place, something horribly traumatic event, catastrophic occurs, and two things happen. Number one, it confirms, yes, I suck. And because I suck, this thing happened. Right? Now your mind is freaking the hell out because the thing you've been trying to avoid for your life is actually true. How the hell am I supposed to navigate life now? Right? Straw that breaks the camel's back. They already had 1,000 pounds of stuff on there. Throw this thing on top of it, everything breaks. Right? So a lot of these really traumatic events are just like the highlight reel of the worst examples of an underlying trend or an underlying narrative. So, like almost drowning, the helplessness, not being able to take care of yourself, nobody there to take care of you, being neglected. I wonder if that narrative kind of shows up in other places in your life.
Well, there's definitely some good
Right?
questions there for sure, huh?
And then the rescuer syndrome. Kate, I know how much this sucks. I don't want to have anybody else go through this either, obviously. Right? But the interesting thing about rescuer syndrome is this: you're not actually trying to solve their pain, you're trying to solve your pain because it hurts you to see them that way. I'm going to make this discomfort go away by making sure they're fixed.
Mm.
Trust me, lived that for 47 freaking years. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, son of a gun. I was dating this lady and like her life was kind of a mess, but I cared a lot about it. I cared about her a lot. And what do? I fix people for a living. That's literally what I do. Oh, let me help you with this stuff. Right. So I was trying to help her improve, trying to help her improve. And she just didn't really want to do that work. It was too confronting, too challenging. So the more I tried to help her, the more resentful she got. And she freaking dumped me for it. Oops. Okay. So me trying to help drove the person I care about away. I need to take another look at this because obviously I'm doing stuff wrong. And that's when I was like, oh shoot, like I'm not trying to help her because she wants help. I'm trying to help her because the chaos of her life is making my life a mess. And rather than get her out of my life, which would be the obvious thing, that way I don't have the mess. No, I want her around, so I got to find a way to get rid of her mess so it doesn't make my life messy.
Ouch, that one.
Oops. Oops.
Yeah, I think that one
Oops.
struck a nerve with a bunch of people.
Well,
uh,
and it's the most natural thing in the world. Like, you know how much this sucks. You know the way out. Like, part of why I do what I do is like I have been through hell, dragged myself through hell, and it's entirely my fault. That's the worst part about it. Like, nobody did this to me. It's just I'm autistic and didn't know it, and so like I'm the architect of my own misery, right? Which gave me a unique perspective of like, oh wait, I did actually create all this stuff myself. It's all based on my misunderstanding. It's like, man, that was a real kick in the nuts. But why would I want anybody else to suffer? Like, I've got this really cool way out. And it's not actually, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't even take any long, right? Got these high level concepts, fix these things, pretty universal. Everybody gets there kind of the other way, but it kind of all looks the same. Why not just like do this for everybody? Well, they have to want it. They have to want to do it. They have to see the value in themselves. They have to be willing to confront the things they need to confront in order to make those changes. Not everybody's there, right? Not everybody's there. And that's okay because either they will or they won't. And if they don't, that's their choice. I got to give them that. Got to respect their free will. You know, my only hope is like by dropping this out there is like, hey, there is a possibility. Maybe it's something you want to look at,
no, for sure, and it's a very powerful, powerful realization, powerful
right? Yep.
note to hit at this time, especially because Ryan, it's been a great conversation, but we are getting pretty close to the time.
Hmm.
Um, is there anything that you wish I would have asked that I didn't ask, or anything that we should have covered that we didn't cover today?
All I would say is getting anything. This is something that I live my life by. The only thing you need to, there are only three things you need to do to get everything you want in life. Okay. The first thing is be your authentic self to the maximum extent possible. All right. This is actually the hardest step because a lot of us don't really like who we are when we ask ourselves who we are. We're always trying to be somebody else. Who am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to change? Who am I also supposed to become? you gotta own what it is you are right now, and all those voices inside that are saying, "Hey, maybe there's something wrong." Because once you figure that stuff out, correct it, make peace with it, integrate it, you actually get to be what you really are instead of trying to pretend to be somebody else, right? Got Alex Hormozy out there trying to build a stack of undeniable proof that he is who he says he is. Got one piece of undeniable proof, you'd be done. Why do you need a stack? Why does that have to be bigger, right? When you're trying to be somebody else, that process never ends. It never actually works because you know deep down that ain't who you are. So number one, become your authentic self to the maximum extent possible. Do the work you need to do that. Once you're there, now something interesting because everything you're doing in life is actually in line with who you are. At which point you need to listen. All those different parts you have a compass, right? Good and bad, right and wrong, pleasure, pain, right, should and should not. Great. Line them up, point them in the right direction, start going. Pretty soon, something's going to feel weird. One of those compasses is going to start pointing in a different direction. Something's going to be off. At which point you need to step back and get curious. Your mind is saying, hey, there's a problem, there's something we need to pay attention to. There's something in the way of where we want to go. Trying to show you. Great. Step back. Okay. Trying to show me something. What is it? What am I missing? Where's the problem? And then just follow your instincts, those feelings, and those intuitions wherever they may go. Follow your curiosity because it's going to try and highlight that problem for you. And as soon as you know what the problem is, easy to fix, off you go again. It's really all you got to do. But step number one is a pain in the butt to do. That's the hard part. That's the hard part. Fortunately, like I said, there's easier ways to go about it. You can sort of speed run that process if you're doing it the right way by dealing with those major narratives deeper in your mind.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I mean, it's true. And we live in a society where it's funny, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we want authenticity, and yet we're going more towards I won't call it fake. Um,
Yeah. Facade.
yeah, there you go. That's a
Yeah.
good word.
Projection, that the image, the front, the facade, the veneer, right? Let me show you this image because if I show you this image and you tell me it's right, then I get to believe that I'm that. Yeah, but if it's not who I am.
And I mean that's essentially what marketing companies do. And no,
Yeah.
I'm not
Social media.
judging. I'm
Yeah.
not,
All I know. Yep.
uh,
Yep.
but essentially is what it is. I mean, I went through this myself too. Like, I had to get a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of photos taken recently. Um, they're like, oh, these ones aren't good. These ones aren't good. They're not good. Oh no, those ones aren't good. These ones are good. This one's okay. Do more of these. Well, hang on a second. And then they say, be yourself.
Yeah,
Right.
be
So
yourself while standing in front of the private jet that you don't own. Sure. Yeah, be yourself while standing in front of the Lamborghini you just rented. Sure. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Sure.
it's it's
Mm.
interesting for sure. But
Yep. Yep.
again, Ryan, just one last question before we go. How can
Mhm.
our listeners reach out and learn more or get in touch with you in case they have questions or
Sure.
they want to learn
Well, the place I would start is my book, Winner Peace: How to End Inner Conflict, Make Success Inevitable. It walks you through this whole new model of the mind, helps you understand how the unconscious mind works, helps you understand how we create these beliefs in the first place, helps walk you through how to reinterpret your emotions as questions so they can start helping you, so you can start moving away from that narrative. A lot of the common reframes around some of the common beliefs we created about ourselves when we're young, and then creating the space where, okay, success becomes inevitable. Because your mind is helping you solve problems faster, find problems faster, you're getting where you go faster. If emotions are no longer pain, you can't suffer mentally and emotionally, which means you can work as long and hard as you want to towards those goals, right? And so essentially, things kind of become inevitable. What you want becomes inevitable. That's why solid success becomes inevitable because if you know what the problems are, can work as long as you want to, you're going to get there eventually. If you're ready to do that deeper work, kind of dive into those deep core narratives and get that stuff fixed for good, my website is www.ryanthehypnotist.com. Free 45-minute consultation. We'll kind of dig into what's like not working for you in your life these days. Take a look at kind of what's been going on in your life as a whole. I'll show you the different patterns, show you where they're coming from so you can understand what's going on, and we can talk about how to get you there. Typically, I'm able to get you that place I was talking about um, pretty quickly, usually in 3 or 4 sessions to lay all the foundation work, right? Charge a flat fee, work on a programmatic basis. I'll work with you however long we need you to get there. 1 session, 10 sessions, I don't care.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show, Ryan. And to all our listeners,
Mhm.
don't worry, we are going to put all that in the show notes at the bottom of the show notes, so that you don't have to grab a pen and paper or anything like that. And again, thank you so much for being on the show, Ryan. Thank you for all the information that you've given, and to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation or inspiration for someone else. And see you again next time.
Cheers.
All right.
Great show, man.
No, no, it was good. I mean, I really loved